So, there's a fun little moment in any relationship that's circling the drain. It's not the screaming match, not the dramatic suitcase packing montage. No, it's subtler than that. It's the exact moment you realize you're no longer a person to your partner. You've been downgraded to a convenient household appliance with a bank account. Think washing machine meets ATM. Congratulations, you're now Whirlpool Platinum, but with direct deposit. My name's Everett, and my moment of enlightenment came on a Tuesday, which feels about right. Tuesdays are when bad news likes to stretch its legs. It arrived via text message, one that wasn't meant for me, which, I admit, is probably the most cliché way to uncover betrayal. But hey, the classics are classics for a reason. Romeo had poison, Othello had a handkerchief, and I got a message. See, Naomi, my girlfriend of 2 years, had this endearing little habit of leaving her laptop open on the kitchen counter like it was some kind of public art installation. Normally, I didn't look. Why would I? I've got my own steady supply of digital misery waiting for me every time I open Twitter. I didn't need to borrow hers. But fate, or maybe just poor password hygiene, had other plans. I was mid-coffee ritual, watching the French press like it held the answers to life, when a notification bloomed on the screen. It was from a contact named Chad. Of course it was. The profile picture featured a man who looked like he'd been aging in a vat of artisanal kombucha. The kind of guy who probably says, bro, as punctuation. The message read, last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. He suspect anything? Now, for most people, this is the part where you'd hear yelling, slamming doors, maybe some well-aimed glassware. But me? I just stood there, holding my coffee mug, thinking, yep, that tracks. See, after 2 years with Naomi, I'd learned that her world wasn't exactly what you'd call normal. It wasn't governed by things like logic, reason, or fidelity. No, Naomi lived in a special, enchanted kingdom ruled by astrology, auras, and the unwavering belief that her feelings were more important than, say, physics. I actually tested this once. Naomi, I said, while she was charting our compatibility on some app that looked like Candy Crush for the spiritually bankrupt. Gravity exists whether you feel like it or not. She rolled her eyes. You're such a Capricorn, Everett. Which, according to her, was both a criticism and a diagnosis. So yeah, her feelings didn't just matter. They were laws of nature. More binding than taxes. More permanent than death. And definitely more real than, say, objective reality. The red flags had been there all along. Of course, they weren't just flags. They were giant, neon-lit billboards flashing, "Run, you idiot," in Times Square font. Take the time she insisted we couldn't go on vacation because Mercury was in a really aggressive retrograde, which, in her translation, meant the planets were all busy hate-screwing each other in the sky, and somehow our flight would get caught in the cosmic crossfire. According to Naomi, booking a ticket during planetary breakup sex was basically asking to die in a flaming ball of karma. I remember saying, so you're telling me the flight's not safe because the universe is bad-mouthing you? She nodded gravely, like she was confirming a medical diagnosis. Exactly. It's dangerous energy. Right. Because what United Airlines really fears isn't mechanical failure. It's Naomi's horoscope. Then there was her explanation for why she couldn't pay her share of the rent. According to Naomi, it wasn't unemployment or overspending on crystals. No, it was a scarcity mindset she was working on, which, to my ears, sounded suspiciously like what the rest of us just call being broke. Everett, money is just energy. She once lectured me, after I asked why she'd Venmo requested me for $40 worth of oat milk and incense. Then please, I said, summon some energy to the landlord before we get evicted. But of course, I'd chalked it all up to personality quirks. I thought it was charming, in a dysfunctional rom-com sort of way. I'd seen her ex, Chad, around a few times. Part-time musician, full-time energy healer, the kind of guy who wears a lot of linen and unironically uses the word vibe like it's legal Tinder. Good vibes only, bro, he'd said to me once, when I pointed out that his band was 3 hours late to start playing. I should have known then. But no, Everett the bedrock here thought being the stable one, with a salary and a sensible sleep schedule, actually counted for something. Turns out, I was just the foundation she liked to build her more exciting castles on. Castles complete with kombucha-aged Chad. So when the text from him popped up, I decided to skip the theatrics. No shouting, no flipping the table, no monologues that would have just been wasted on her. I poured my coffee, calm as you like, sat down across from Naomi, and waited for her to finish her morning meditation. Or, as I preferred to call it, her 10 minutes of strategic silence before asking for a favor. When her eyes finally fluttered open, radiating a tranquility that now seemed deeply offensive, I leaned forward and said, so, are we in an open relationship now? Just curious, Because I didn't get the memo, and I feel like I should probably update my calendar. Maybe set some reminders. Naomi sleeps with Chad. Everett picks up groceries. You know, keep things organized. She blinked at me, the serene post-meditation glow curdling into confusion. It was the exact look of someone whose Wi-Fi had just cut out in the middle of downloading Universal Wisdom 2.0. What are you talking about? She asked, voice all breathy innocence. Chad, I said, taking a slow, deliberate sip of coffee. He seems very pleased with your recent performance review. Even asked if I'd figured out the plot twist yet in this little domestic drama. The color drained from her face so fast, it was like watching a vampire speedrun dinner. Fascinating, really. You could practically see the gears grinding in her head, sifting through a mental library of pop psychology and Instagram therapy quotes to find the perfect one to absolve her of all responsibility. And, after a few seconds of buffering, complete with the vacant stare and little inhale she always did when searching for her higher self, she landed on one. She took a deep, calming breath, as if I were the one creating a scene, and adopted the patient tone of a crisis negotiator talking a jumper off a ledge. Look, she began, I know this is hard for you to understand, but I've been going through a lot. Chad and I have a deep energetic connection. There's history there. I've been trying to figure things out, to find my truth. I just stared at her. It was a masterpiece of emotional deflection. She wasn't cheating. Oh no. She was on a noble quest for authenticity. I wasn't a betrayed partner. I was just the grumpy villager blocking the road on her grand expedition to the summit of Mount Self-Actualization. You're sleeping with your ex-boyfriend, I said, my voice as flat as the barren plains of her moral landscape. That's the fact on the table. The rest is just decorative language you picked up from a podcast hosted by a woman who definitely sells her bathwater on Etsy. And then came the line. The line so iconic it deserves to be engraved on a monument to gaslighting. Right next to I'm sorry you feel that way. She tilted her head with an expression of profound disappointment, like I'd just failed a pop quiz on empathy, or worse, forgot her rising sign. Why are you acting like such a victim? She said. You knew I was still figuring things out. Ah yes, figuring things out. Translation, a rigorous quest for inner truth that somehow always ended with her legs in the air. I didn't respond immediately. I let her words hang there in the air, marinating in their sheer, breathtaking audacity. The anger was present, a low electrical hum under my skin, but it was drowned out by a much stronger, much funnier feeling, relief. It was the exhilarating relief of finally having a definitive answer. No more guesswork, no more wondering. The lab results were in, and science had confirmed it. I was dating a crazy person. I stood up from the table. You know what? Thank you, I said, her brow furrowed, the serene guru script suddenly misplaced. Thank you for what? For the clarity, I said, smiling. It's a real gift. And then I walked out the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently behind me, a gesture of finality she was far too self-absorbed to recognize. I heard her call my name, her voice laced with annoyance, not concern. The kind of tone you use when your DoorDash order is late, not when your boyfriend has just walked out after catching you doing naked yoga with your ex. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. I ended up at a coffee shop down the street, sat down with my laptop, and asked for the Wi-Fi password. The barista pointed at a chalkboard where it was written out, Believe in your dreams and shine bright 88. A ridiculously long string of inspirational words. It felt fitting, really, like the universe itself was trolling me. The text from Naomi started almost immediately. First came the angry ones. You're being childish. You're avoiding communication. This isn't healthy. Then the concerned ones, like she'd just swapped hats. We need to hold space for each other's feelings. We need to process this together. I stared at my screen. It was like being lectured by a fortune cookie that had cheated on you. I could practically hear her voice, that patient, full therapist cadence. Everett, this isn't about betrayal. It's about growth. Growth. Yeah, mainly in Chad's pants. She genuinely believed I was just taking a walk to cool off, maybe brooding at the park until the next phase of the moon. In her intricately constructed worldview, I was the stable one, the predictable one, the human safety net. I paid the bills on time. I remembered to buy toilet paper. I didn't skip rent because of a scarcity mindset. I was the solid ground she stood on while her head floated in the clouds, figuring things out, with Captain Linen Pants and his artisanal balls chakra. Men like me didn't just leave. Not in her playbook. We sulked, we got mad, maybe punched a wall if we were feeling particularly cinematic. And then, after the appropriate storm of testosterone, we came back. We accepted the new, terrible terms of the relationship like obedient little appliances with direct deposit. Her entire strategy depended on my predictability. And as I sat there sipping a coffee that tasted like sweet, sweet freedom, I realized she had just handed me the perfect opportunity. She thought she was holding all the cards, but she had just accidentally shown me her entire hand. And it was a terrible, laughable hand. The kind of hand you'd fold before the dealer even finished blinking. My turning point wasn't some grand emotional breakdown. No whiskey-soaked crying jag. No dramatic speech to the mirror. It wasn't a moment of tearful resolve at all. It was a calm, almost boring logistical decision. Like updating your antivirus software. I decided to launch a new personal project. Something constructive, something to keep me busy while Naomi was off realigning her aura with imported incense sticks. I called it Operation Decoupling. The mission was elegant in its simplicity, surgically remove myself from her life with such precision that by the time she realized I was truly gone, it would be far too late. No door slamming, no scenes, no performative shouting in the rain. Just silence. A vacuum. Because sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone who thrives on drama is deny them the audience. This wasn't about vengeance in the cinematic sense. It wasn't me screaming, "You'll regret this," as the credits rolled. No, this was about proving that the stable, predictable one, the guy who remembered to buy toilet paper, could also be ruthlessly efficient. That I could dismantle the circus tent of her chaos without so much as a squeaky wheel. The key to the whole operation was her upcoming weekend yoga retreat in the mountains. She was leaving on a Friday afternoon, wouldn't be back until Sunday night. A 2-day orgy of down-dogging and collective moaning disguised as finding stillness. She described it to me as essential for realigning her chakras. I remember nodding politely while thinking, sure, Naomi. Or maybe it's just 48 hours of stretching positions you usually reserve for Chad. But whatever the excuse, it was perfect. A glorious 48-hour window. She would leave on a spiritual journey to find her center, and I would use that time to help her find a half-empty apartment. But just moving out wasn't enough. That was only phase 1. Phase 2 was the centerpiece of the whole operation. The crown jewel. The envelope. I wasn't just going to ghost her like some spineless Tinder date. No, I needed to leave her with a parting gift. A little souvenir of my residency in her circus tent. Something she could pull out years later, clutch to her chest, and think, ah yes, that time I ruined a perfectly decent man in the name of authenticity. Since Naomi was so fond of history, I figured I'd help her preserve some. But I needed more than just the one message I'd seen from Captain Kombucha. I wanted the whole saga, the dirty scrolls, the sacred text of her grand expedition into Chad's organic, linen-draped loins. I wasn't going back on that laptop as a suspicious boyfriend. Oh no, I was going in as an archivist, a historian, a curator of the museum of Naomi's bad decisions. So, I returned to the apartment that evening with my game face firmly in place. You'd have thought I was heading into a poker tournament. Naomi greeted me like a guru who'd just descended from the mountain, all apologies and calm therapeutic tones. She'd even made dinner, quinoa salad, her specialty. It tasted exactly like regret sprinkled with lemon juice. She clasped her hands together in faux sincerity. Everett, I think we just need to talk about boundaries. About creating safe space for both of us while I'm on this journey. I chewed, nodded gravely, and tried not to choke on the irony. Of course, I said. Healthy boundaries are important. Like, maybe not screwing your ex while I'm still paying half the rent. That sort of boundary. Her face tightened, but she smoothed it over with that therapist voice again. You're being reactive. What I need is for you to hold space for me, to give me room to grow. Room to grow. Sure. Preferably while spread eagle in Chad's Airbnb futon. It took every ounce of my self-control not to burst out laughing right there, quinoa flying across the table. Instead, I played along. I was remorseful. I was confused. I agreed with her that yes, we needed to talk more when she got back from her retreat. I said the words slowly, with just the right amount of tremble, like a soap opera husband trying to win back his wife before the commercial break. I was the perfect wounded partner. The model patient. Exactly the role she expected me to play. I was so convincing I almost felt bad. Almost. And then, like any good actor who knows the curtain's about to fall, I decided to collect my payment. Back rent. Interest. Damages. The whole package. I didn't say a word about it. Just pulled her close, kissed her like I hadn't kissed her in months, and suddenly she was melting in my hands. We went at it like the world was ending at midnight. Condoms lined up on the nightstand like little invoices waiting to be stamped, paid in full. Every thrust was me itemizing expenses. The dinners, the vacations, the Uber rides, the goddamn scented candles she just had to have. Swipe. Insert. Withdraw. Repeat. If I couldn't get my money back, I was at least going to drain the account. Naomi, of course, was happy to oblige. She thought it was some grand reconciliation, some fiery passion rekindled. She gave it everything. Moans, scratches, the whole tantric symphony. By the end of it, she was limp, gasping, sprawled across the sheets like a rag doll tossed aside at a garage sale. Exhausted, satisfied, blissfully unaware that she wasn't getting a lover back. She was getting an eviction notice with a sweaty signature. That night, after Naomi had collapsed into the kind of sleep only yoga instructors and serial liars can manage, I slipped out of bed. She was snoring softly beside me, no doubt dreaming of downward dogs and duplicity. Her mouth hung open just enough to remind me of why I always kept tissues on the nightstand. Her laptop was sitting on the desk like an invitation. It wasn't even password protected. Of course it wasn't. In Naomi's mind, her privacy was protected by my supposed lack of imagination. She thought I was too busy worrying about deadlines and utility bills to suspect she was out getting spiritually aligned on someone else's mattress. Cute. It took me less than 5 minutes to find the messaging app. And when I did, oh, jackpot. It was a goldmine. A treasure trove. The Dead Sea Scrolls of infidelity, preserved not on papyrus, but in emojis and poorly punctuated sexts. The conversation with Chad went back months. Apparently, they'd been at it longer than the warranty on our dishwasher. There it all was. The flirty one-liners, the logistical planning for their meetups while I was at work, the explicit recaps of their time together. And then the critiques of me. God, those were my favorite part. I just wish Everett was more emotionally open, she wrote once, which is hilarious considering she was emotionally open with her legs for Chad 3 nights a week. Another gem. He's too grounded in the material world. Translation. I pay rent, buy groceries, and don't think LSD counts as a food group. My aura, according to her, was a bit beige. Beige. As if I were a pair of khakis she outgrew. But the best one, the one that should go in the Louvre of betrayal, was a message she sent about my lack of appreciation for her spiritual depth. Right before she asked Chad if he could score her a bulk deal on party drugs for an upcoming festival. Real profound, babe. Nothing says enlightenment like Molly and a porta potty. I screenshotted everything. Every loving exchange. Every complaint about me. Every plan they made for their next rendezvous. I cataloged it all with the meticulous care of a museum curator. If betrayal were an art form, Naomi was Picasso and Chad was, well, whatever you call the guy who paints hotel room nudes. Dozens of screenshots. Hundreds. Stored neatly on a flash drive. It was my masterpiece, my little black box of truth. My final report. All this while I made sure to use a condom and get my dues. If Naomi was going to treat our relationship like a rental agreement, I was damn sure going to collect back rent with interest. Every night was a transaction, and I was the IRS with a grudge. She didn't even complain, quite the opposite. She was eager. Like she thought overcompensating with enthusiasm would cover up the fact she'd been hosting office hours with Chad's anatomy. By the end of the week, she was so drained she could barely keep her eyes open at dinner, fork hanging in midair like she was stuck in a loading screen. On Friday afternoon, I helped her pack her bag for the retreat. Do you think this top is too low-cut for a meditation circle? She asked, holding up something that looked less like clothing and more like bait. I smiled, folding her yoga pants into the suitcase. No, sweetheart. If the goal is enlightenment, flashing a little cleavage can only speed up the process. Maybe the guru will see God faster. She smirked, thinking I was just being cheeky. Don't forget your crystals, I added, slipping the bag shut. You'll need all the spiritual protection you can get, especially if Mercury still hates screwing Mars this weekend. She laughed, kissed me, and thanked me for being so supportive. I kissed her back, tasting the irony, because I already knew where that bag was really going. So before she left, I gave Naomi one last proper send-off. You know, a going-away gift. Not flowers, not chocolates, but the kind of goodbye that leaves your thighs trembling like they've been through boot camp. If she was going to wander off into some spiritual retreat to find herself, I figured she might as well spend the weekend walking like she'd misplaced her pelvic floor. I put in the kind of effort a man saves for the apocalypse. Every thrust a line item on the invoice of my wasted rent and restaurant tabs. She kept moaning about alignment and chakras opening. And I thought, perfect, maybe the stars can realign her spine while we're at it. By the time I was done, she was spread across the sheets looking like a ghost had wrung her out. Wow, she whispered, breathless. That felt different. Yeah, I said, rolling off her. That's called value for money. She didn't get the joke, but she did need an extra 10 minutes to waddle to the bathroom. Later, I carried her yoga mat to the car. It felt like escorting a prop more than a belonging. She clutched it like it was her passport to nirvana. I kissed her goodbye at the door. A chaste, meaningless peck on the cheek. More of a tap. Really, like two coworkers politely bumping foreheads by accident. Have a great time, I said, my voice dripping with sincerity so thick it could have clogged a drain. I hope you figure everything out, she smiled. then gave me this little patronizing pat on the cheek like I was a child about to graduate from crayons to markers. "I will," she promised, eyes shining with that faux spiritual certainty she'd picked up from too many TED Talks. "And we'll talk when I'm back. I have a good feeling about us." Right. Us. As if she and Chad the tantric in turn weren't about to discover the secret of eternal downward dog. She drove off, leaving me in a cloud of patchouli-scented exhaust fumes. It smelled like a yoga studio had been set on fire. The moment her car turned the corner, Operation Decoupling began. I had already rented the moving truck online, a 20-foot behemoth that was glorious overkill. Honestly, I could have fit my life into a large Uber XL, but sometimes symbolism matters. 10 minutes later, my two best friends, Henry and Sam, arrived, both grinning like kids who'd just been handed water balloons and told the target was the principal. I'd briefed them the day before over beers. Their reactions had followed a beautiful 3-act arc. First shock, then righteous anger, and finally, the kind of gleeful, conspiratorial enthusiasm usually reserved for planning a heist. They weren't just friends helping me move. They were my mission support team. "All right," Henry said, rubbing his hands together as he looked up at the apartment like it was a fortress in a war movie. "Let's extract the hostage." "The hostage is me," I reminded him. Sam nodded sagely. "Yeah, but you're also the hostage negotiator. Try not to shoot yourself in the foot on the way out." The rules of engagement were simple. My stuff goes, her stuff stays. No damage, no malice. This wasn't about destruction. It was about erasure. We worked with the efficiency of a pit crew. Honestly, it was impressive. I half expected someone to start timing us with a stopwatch. It was a surprisingly complex task, untangling 2 years of a shared life, like dismantling a very passive-aggressive IKEA project. The kitchen was a nightmare. Utensils everywhere, most of which I didn't even remember buying. "Who is this weird spiralizing vegetable thing?" Sam asked, holding it up like he'd unearthed an alien artifact. "That's hers," I said. "It's a tool of sadness. Leave it." He nodded gravely, as if I'd just identified a landmine. The bookshelf was worse. It required careful archaeological work to separate my boring history tomes from her collection of crystal healing guides and past life regression manuals. She had one book literally titled Your Aura and You. I briefly considered slipping it into my box out of spite, but then realized I'd rather set my eyebrows on fire than ever be seen owning it. The bathroom cabinet was a minefield. Her serums, tinctures, and 27 different moisturizers glared at me. I took my toothbrush and left her sitting there like a sad, pink monument to betrayal. Honestly, if toothbrushes could talk, hers would probably apologize in a fake accent and then cheat again. We cleared out my side of the closet, my drawers, my desk. It was weirdly cathartic. With every box I packed, I felt lighter, like every pair of socks was a tiny exorcism. The big screen TV came with us. I had the receipt. The espresso machine too, courtesy of my mother's good taste. We left behind the yoga mat, the meditation cushions, and that half-finished painting she was working on of what she called the color of sound. It looked like someone sneezed paint onto canvas and then charged rent for it. By Saturday evening, it was done. Every trace of my existence, my clothes, my books, my electronics, my painfully beige aura, had been scrubbed from the apartment. My friends and I stood in the living room, which now had a comical amount of empty space. The couch looked lonely, like it had been stood up on prom night. The walls were bare where my pictures had been. It looked like the apartment had just given up. Then came the final touch, phase 2, the crown jewel of petty closure. I drove to the 24-hour print shop like some trench-coated villain in a B-movie, only instead of contraband, my weapon was a flash drive full of screenshots. Every ugly word, every thirsty emoji, every late-night confession between her and her soulmate du jour. The clerk behind the counter didn't know what he was printing, but the way his eyebrows twitched at page 6 told me he definitely knew it wasn't tax forms. Do you want these double-sided?" he asked, holding up one page with an expression that was a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. "No," I said. "Glossy. Single-sided. I want every line of text to shine like scripture. Let future archaeologists marvel at it." He didn't argue. 30 perfect sheets slid out of the printer, crisp as sin. They looked like exhibits for a trial where the verdict was already written. I slipped the whole stack into a clean manila envelope. No frills, just sharp clarity. On the front, in blocky black marker, I wrote, "CL's figuring things out. Project research notes." It was equal parts ironic label and a knife to the ribs. Driving back to the apartment one last time felt surreal. The place already wasn't mine, but I walked in like a ghost returning to haunt it. I placed the envelope dead center on the coffee table. That table had once held wine glasses, candles, her crystals, her half-finished sound color, painting sessions. Now it had one thing: evidence. The final punctuation mark of our story. My friend Sam whistled low. That's brutal, man. It's honest, I said. Brutal is just honesty with the lights on. We did a final sweep. Every corner, every drawer. Nothing left of me but the envelope, pulsing like a landmine waiting to go off. Then I locked the door behind us. A lock can sound final if you listen hard enough. The truck ride to my new apartment was strangely quiet. My friends cracked a few jokes, but I was running on fumes of adrenaline and grim satisfaction. The place itself? A small, aggressively bland shoebox I'd managed to secure that morning. The walls were so beige they made beige look rebellious. It smelled faintly like old soup and new carpet glue, but it was mine. That was the important part. I ordered 3 large pizzas because nothing says ritual cleansing like greasy cardboard and melted cheese. My friends sprawled on the floor with me, laughing, eating, dropping pepperoni on their shirts. For the first time in months, I wasn't clenching my jaw. I wasn't waiting for the next lie to crawl out of her mouth. That night, I turned my phone off and let the silence stretch. A heavy, glorious silence that felt like anesthesia for the soul. Sunday, I unpacked the essentials. A mattress, a lamp, my laptop, and most importantly, the coffee machine. Setting it on the counter felt like a sacred act. My own small altar to sanity. And in that moment, in that sterile little apartment with its weird smell and my greasy fingers, I realized something shocking. I didn't think about her at all. The storm hit Sunday night, right on schedule. Heavy rain against the window, wind howling like it was trying to claw its way in. Around 9:40 p.m., I broke my little vow of peace and turned my phone back on. It lit up like a Christmas tree in hell. The thing practically vibrated itself off the counter. 30 voicemails, nearly 40 missed calls. And the texts, my God, the texts. The progression was art. A symphony. If Freud had been alive, he would have bought popcorn. The first message popped up at 8:47 p.m. Confusion. Hey, just got back. Weird question, but where's all your stuff? Did we get robbed? Call me. I almost laughed. Almost. 10 minutes later came the shift. I could practically hear the envelope flap being torn open in my head. At 8:57 p.m., rage bled through the screen. How could you do this? You are a sick, twisted psycho. I hate you. By 9 p.m., she was reaching for the classic move, blame shifting. You invaded my privacy. That's the real betrayal here. You went through my things. That's illegal. Illegal. That one killed me. I set my phone on the counter, pointed at it, and said out loud, Sure, Naomi. Adultery is fine, but the real crime here is my excessive interest in stationery and print services. By 9:42 p.m., the tone flipped again. This one was syrupy, slippery, bargaining mode. Okay, listen. I was just confused, alright? It was a mistake. I was always going to choose you. You were supposed to fight for me. I muttered back to the empty room. Fight for you? What is this, the UFC? Then another ping at 10:03 p.m. You don't just give up on someone you love. Oh, but you do. You really, really do. The silence stretched after that. I didn't respond. Didn't bite. Just sat there, eating leftover pizza straight from the box, watching the rain slam sideways against the window. And right on cue, as the clock crept toward 11:57 p.m., the next act began, pathetic desperation. I'm so sorry. I messed up so badly. The apartment is so empty and scary. Please just call me. I miss you. I love you. That was the message that came in, lit up my screen like a flare. I sat there, phone in hand, and read it twice. My lips pulled into a thin, sarcastic smile. Exactly what I had expected. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. Sorry that her stable, predictable safety net had decided to pack itself up, take the truck, and drive away. The call started not long after. I let them ring out, sliding into voicemail. Every time the phone buzzed, I pictured her pacing the apartment, staring at that envelope on the coffee table, those glossy photos screaming back at her. The voicemails piled up. Some were incoherent sobbing, some sharp and venomous with accusations, some pathetic, desperate pleas. On the second night, I played one on speaker with Mark sitting across from me, beer in hand. Naomi's voice crackled through. Everett, please. You're overreacting. It didn't mean anything. Just call me, please, please. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I feel like I'm going insane. Mark raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're figuring things out. Retreat got canceled. I chuckled, shaking my head. Yeah, too bad the data came back inconclusive. By the third day, I figured she'd had enough time to sit in that echoey apartment, staring at her so-called research notes, marinating in her own mess. That's when the final text came in. Please, I'll do anything. I sat back, thumb hovering over the keyboard, and carefully typed out my reply, word by word, the way you draft a thesis conclusion. Naomi, I wrote. I'm glad my departure seems to have accelerated your figuring things out process. It's clear from the data that my presence was the primary variable complicating your research. You're welcome. On a separate note, you should probably change your Netflix password. Please lose this number. I read it over once. It was sharp, precise, exactly the tone I wanted. I hit send. Then, with no hesitation, I blocked her number. Blocked her on every app. Blocked Chad for good measure. Peace of mind. I set the phone down, leaned back into my new, uncomfortable couch. The apartment was quiet. Not the suffocating kind of quiet she'd been crying about, but clean. I walked over to my little espresso machine, ground some beans, and brewed myself a cup. The smell filled the place, rich and strong. I took a sip, let the silence settle over me. The project was complete. My life was finally blessed. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.